We are well past that point in the early year when everyone has fallen off of their New Year's resolutions. And while that can be a bummer, the good news is you actually don't need a New Year's resolution to start or finish your book. All you need is a writing routine that works for you. And that's why today I'm going to talk about how to shape a writing routine in a way that you can actually stick to it. Stay tuned. You've been writing your memoir, maybe even for years. You know your material, you know what it means. What's missing isn't the story, it's the structure. And that's why we started the Memoir Method Book Club. Every single month, Emily Thrash, a professional writer and editor, teaches you how to read like a writer by breaking down a published memoir and showing you what it's doing under the surface. Your first session is free. Head over to pageandpodium.com/book club to sign up. It might surprise you to hear that I actually don't get very many questions about writing routine in my day-to-day conversations with clients and potential clients at all. Normally, instead of asking about writing routine, what folks will do is come to me and give me all of the problems that they're having with the outcome of their writing. So typically this will be things like, I can't seem to get any momentum. As soon as I write something, I delete it and start over again, and I'm staying continually stuck in this same spot. Or I will hear, things keep coming up in my life. As soon as I start to make momentum, I fall off the train, and then I can't remember what I was trying to do, so I can't move forward from there very efficiently either. Sometimes this will just sound simply like, every time I try to start my book, I end up shoving it into a drawer, and here we are 5, 10, 15 years later with no book. But although I know it feels like a magical thing to be able to achieve this goal of finishing a book, and it is pretty magical, there really is no magic spell to being able to get through the book. The only thing you need is a solid, repeatable, reliable way for you to sit down and get words on the page. The funny thing about books is it's just words strung into sentences, strung into paragraphs, pages, and eventually the whole book. So all you've got to do is chip away at it. But what trips us up so often is that we don't have a system for actually making ourselves sit down and chip away at it. And that's why today I wanted to kind of visit some of the problems that I see coming up for folks with their writing routines. But more importantly, I want to give you some tips that I have used myself. These are tips I have heard from other writers that I'm friends with and know from the industry, and things I have shared with my clients, of course. And all of these tips are designed to help you really evaluate your writing routine. One thing that happens, and I want to add this in as just a caveat, just something to keep in the back of your mind. One thing that I do find happens very often is that if we have at one point in our lives established a writing routine that worked for us, oftentimes we are very, very reluctant to let go of that particular routine, even when we can see that it's not working for us anymore. And I get that. Let me say, I get that, because there is something about letting go of that kind of structure that you had, that support, that rhythm, that you know did work. It felt good at one point. Because when we let go of that, it feels a little bit like we're cutting ourselves loose, right? We're out to sea, we don't have a paddle or a sail. But the good news really is that even though our writing routines can sometimes stop working for us, typically all we've got to do is just reevaluate the structure of our lives, because oftentimes we'll pretty clearly see that the reason that routine worked was something to do with how our lives were structured at that time. So of course, all we need to do is figure out how our lives are structured differently now so that we can reverse engineer ourselves a routine that we're going to be excited to show up for every single time we have that writing routine scheduled. And I will tell you, I talk a lot about the psychology of creativity, perfectionism, all of these things on this channel. And one of the things that is constant across all of the topics that we talk about on the Page and Podium podcast is that when we're talking about creativity, yes, it is free, it is expressive, it is from our very souls. That is all true. But also, It requires a structure. And that's really all a writing routine is. It is a structure that holds us to our goals, keeps us moving forward in a really predictable, plannable way, while also giving us the freedom and flexibility to get ourselves on the page, to really share these things that we know could help others, but also that feel really good for us to get down and get out of our brains and really bring into our community. So as we're going through here, really keep that in mind. We are not trying to beat ourselves over the head with rules and regulations and punishments if we don't do what we're supposed to do. None of that is going to serve you in the long run. Rather, what we are trying to do here is build out some kind of a structure, a scaffold, that will let us move forward in this kind of more unbounded creative pursuit without feeling like we are totally drifting in the middle of the ocean. So to that end, I've got 5 tips that are going to help you think through your own writing routine. Now, as we go through here, I will not be suggesting actual patterns that you should use. I don't believe in that, and while I know that there are some of these very popular hacks that people pass around, I am truly of the mind that if we are trying to express our authentic, genuine, true self on the page, we've also got to build the structure around it that reflects our authentic, genuine, true self. And that means it's not going to be a cookie cutter. So as we go through here, you will have to really evaluate your life, think about what's working for you in other kinds of areas so that you can move forward efficiently with figuring out this new writing routine. Okay, so the first thing really to that end is I want to suggest that as you're thinking of what your writing routine should be, you think about connecting that routine to something else that already exists. Now, of course, most of our lives do have some sort of set routine, right? For most of us, on the weekdays, we are waking up, we're going to work, we're coming home, we're getting dinner on the table, and then we're doing our kind of evening activities, getting kids ready for bed, whatever that might be, rinse and repeat. And usually our weekends are a little bit different, but oftentimes the weekends have some of that kind of same structure, these big blocks of time that we repeat pretty much over and over and over without really thinking much about it. Well, these can be such a service to you as you're developing a writing routine because you already do have systems and structures that are working for you, right? Most of us don't forget that on Monday morning we need to get up and go to work, right? Most of us don't forget that when it gets to be 9 or 10 at night, if you go to bed really early like me, or 11 or 12, however late, that you need to go to bed. We don't forget that, right? And that means when we attach our writing routine to those kinds of things, we can also use that kind of set it and forget it type of approach for the writing itself. So for me, the way that this looks is I try to think about things that I find to be really fun, but that do have a little degree of accountability to them. So currently, what my writing routine is that I have a standing coffee date with my best friend every Sunday morning. So we meet at this coffee shop. It's the same one every time, and we meet at the same time every time. And what I decided would work for me this time around on this particular project at this particular moment was to attach my writing time to that Sunday coffee date. So typically what I will do is I will kind of plan to arrive about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours before that coffee date is scheduled to start. At that point, I will do as much writing as I can do, but then if it is time for the coffee date to start and I'm not done, typically we will have the coffee date, my friend will leave, I'll finish up my chapter, and then I'll head home. Now, the magic of this is that this is one of my favorite weekly activities. I love meeting. This is a friend of mine I've had for over 15 years, and I love the chance to catch up with her week after week after week. So I am excited to go to that coffee shop. And I will tell you, that excitement, that kind of enthusiasm that you feel, that is going to push you forward in literally everything that you attach to it, because it's that energy and excitement and enthusiasm that's going to drive you forward to want to do your best work. So for me, this has been such a game changer because I just simply know that that is the day and the time that I do my writing. Now, I want to point something out because I have heard from a couple folks that I've talked about since I've been kind of talking about this new memoir project that I'm working on personally. And that is that I hear people are surprised sometimes that I really am only doing a couple to a few hours of writing on my own projects a week. Just 2 to 3 hours, really. And the reason that I wanted to point that out is I think that it is a really important thing to remember when we're thinking about how much time we need to be putting into our writing routine. I will often hear people talk about how they need to write every day or they are not going to get done with their project. And that's a bit of a spoiler because I'm going to talk a little bit about these kind of cookie cutter approaches in a later tip. But for now, I just want to let you know that I am making great progress on my book in those 2 to 3 hours a week. Now, I have some of the other tips that I'm going to give here incorporated into this routine that does make that time kind of stretch a little bit. It means, every minute has all the value that it can have. But what I wanted to point out here is you don't need 10 or 15 or 20 hours a week to make reliable, consistent progress. You really just need to commit to an amount of time that works. And my suggestion here is that you attach it to something else that you are already going to want to do. So, what are the things in your life that are going to feel good to you that you could attach writing to? For many, many years, I attached it to waking up in the morning. So I would wake up in the morning, I would get my cup of coffee, I would get my laptop, head back to bed, and write for a couple of hours. That worked well for me for years because that is something we do every single day, right? We wake up, we get coffee, I get coffee, and then we are all set to head into this next part of our day. But maybe you've got something that works a little bit differently. We had a member of our Memoir Method group program who liked to stop at a coffee shop on her way home from work. So she was walking, she's in a big city, so she would be walking. There was a coffee shop that was pretty near to her apartment. She would stop off for a couple of hours there and then head home. You're not going to forget to walk home from work, right? So if you are thinking about how you can attach your work routine to your writing routine, it's going to be much, much more effective than telling yourself, in the evening, I'll pick a time or two. So think about what these are. Could you attach your writing routine to waking up, to coming home from work, to maybe supervising your kids at some kind of an activity? What can you attach your writing routine to make it really effortless and feel really good? So that's my first tip. Now, my second tip, I teased earlier in my first tip, and that is that I don't want you to be thinking about writing routines that you would copy from other people. Now, this sounds, I think, pretty obvious, but I do find that it's something that trips a lot of people up. One of the things that Emily and I have talked about quite a bit, actually, in our group calls for the Memoir Method is how different the writing routines that we see in that group are. And just to take Emily and I as two examples, we are very, very different writers. She likes to write late in the evening. That she's kind of a night owl, and that just works really well for her. That time when, you're not really getting emails, people are kind of leaving you alone, it's peaceful and it's quiet, and you've got kind of everything checked off for your day, you can sit and focus on your writing. That does not work for me. If you have been on an afternoon call with me at any point, you know that once it hits about 4:30, my brain power starts to decline significantly. I cannot write in the evening, partly because I know I won't do it, and partly because I know it's not my best work. So for me, I almost always want my writing time to be before noon. I almost always want it to be one of the first things I'm doing. Which of us is right? Both. The only way you're going to find a writing routine that works for you is if you choose what works for you. It might not work for anybody else, and that is totally fine. And here I want to call out a tip that I hear all the time. This tip is a tale as old as time. I remember hearing this when I was very, very first learning to write as a professional, and that is write every day. Now, there is something to be said here because I will tell you, I had a time in my life when I wrote every weekday. I think every day is a bridge too far, but mileage may vary. Do what works for you. But during that time when I was writing every weekday, one thing that did really help was that I was never too far away from the project. Since I was opening it 5 days a week, I always kind of had it planted in the back of my mind, that thing that I was going to do next, right? And the real benefit of that is that when you are consistently thinking about your writing, thinking about your project, you will tend to make connections and think of ideas and pull new scenes and stories you'd maybe forgotten about, because there's just a kind of part of your brain that's just living for that project all the time. But what I want to suggest to you is you do not need to write every day to get that benefit. In fact, my next tip number 3, is I want you to think of your writing routine, think of your writing sessions as chains that link together. Now, we talk about this often in the Memoir Method group program as the chapter train, in which you are just writing your chapters. Since we do not suggest that you go back and edit until you have finished drafting the whole book, you are effectively chaining together your drafts of chapters. It feels so good, y'all, because you know you're making momentum. Well, what this tip is all about, tip 3, is I want you to make sure that at the end of each writing routine session, I want you to plan your next session. Now, what does this look like? Well, I just did this the other day in my Sunday morning writing routine. I had a chapter that I needed to wrap up, and I'll tell you, I broke my routine a bit because I had written half of this chapter the week before, but it was kind of a heady chapter. It was kind of heavy for me, and I just honestly could not get motivated for it, so I wrote the first half. Well, then this last week, I finished up the second half of that chapter. And I was ready to get out of there, y'all. This was a scene that was pretty traumatic for me, actually. It really was a scene that kind of kickstarted a lot of other things forward in my life, just because it was such an intense moment. And without getting into the weeds, I will tell you, I had to pull up an HR document and type quotes out of it. It was tedious, it wasn't fun, it made me feel kind of tense and anxious, and I had to kind of go back emotionally to that place. So needless to say, when I wrapped up that chapter, I wanted to get out of there, but I didn't. Instead, what I did was I opened up my outline, I looked to see what the next chapter was, I copied that chapter description that I had for the next chapter. This is all part of the plan I'll talk about in a second, by the way. And then I put that into a new document that would be the next chapter. Now from there, I made a kind of preliminary little chapter outline. This did not take me long, maybe 20 minutes, but I just went through to kind of lay out where did I want scenes, which things did I want to be scenes, which things would be reflections, was there kind of any amount of research that I would want to weave in there, or kind of key concepts. Basically just trying to get a sense of the shape of that chapter in my mind. And the reason for that is that I don't write every day. I write once a week. That means there is a long stretch between each of my writing routine sessions. No way I'm going to remember what I'm supposed to do the next time I sit down if I don't have some prompting. So, by creating that outline for my next chapter, I am not only getting the benefit of making sure that I'm thinking about that chapter, right? I'm putting together those connections, giving a little thought to some of those scenes, just naturally, because there's a kind of a little place in my mind where that next chapter lives for the week. But I am also increasing my efficiency next week when I sit down to write that chapter. I have a full plan already laid out, and that means my warm-up is not that hard job of figuring out what even goes in the chapter. My warm-up can be the very fun job of starting to type, of filling out a scene that I like, of kind of just typing a reflection. I can pick wherever in that chapter I want to start, so I'm going to pick the part that's fun, right? And in doing that, I have set myself up for such a more efficient writing period. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I can dive right in without further ado. Okay, and that brings me very neatly to tip number 4, which is make a plan. Now, my previous tip was about making a plan for the next session. This tip is about making a plan for the full book. And I know, y'all, I will beat this dead horse till the cows come home because having a plan, especially for your memoir, is the absolute necessity of moving forward. You must have a plan. And here's why. As I was kind of teasing earlier, when you sit down for any day of your writing routine, you're going to have to figure out what you need to be doing. Now, the example that I gave earlier was kind of micro, right? I'm just looking, what's the next scene? And theoretically, you could do that without having a full outline of your book. But the benefit of having a full outline of your book is you know exactly where you're headed. Now, I was wrapping up chapter 9 the other week, and I will be headed into chapter 10. Now, I know that I have 19 chapters. Of course, there's some flexibility. It could end up being 18 or 20 or 22. But I know I've got approximately 19 chapters. Well, you know what that means. That means I can look at that outline and I can say, look, I've got about 10 weeks left. Oh my gosh, that doesn't seem like very much at all. And there is nothing more motivating for your writing routine than being able to see how much you have left. 10 weeks isn't very much. And now I know. Now add to that, of course, that it's going to be much, much easier to do my third tip of setting up your next session before you leave the last if you already know what your next session should be because you've already outlined your whole book. So if you are trying to write especially a memoir, but really any book as a first-time book author, I would really highly recommend go back through this channel, look through our blog at pageandpodium.com/blog, and really get some of those tips on outlining and planning. I promise you that's what's going to move your book forward faster than anything else. But suffice it to say here, having a plan is going to be one of the biggest assets for your writing routine that you can have. And it's pretty simple to do. So sit down, figure out what you want for your entire book so that as you move from session to session to session, you already have a pre-planned approach. You already know what you're supposed to be doing next week. So that little bit of pre-planning the week before, it's a snap. Okay, that is tip number 4. And tip number 5, this is a big one. Do not punish yourself for breaking your routine. Instead, we are going to coax and encourage and celebrate because nothing is going to kill your writing routine faster than trying to beat yourself over the head with it. So I gave you a little bit of a teaser on this a second ago, and that is that I actually broke my routine a couple of weeks ago. And I kind of want to go into the whole thing because I think it's going to be really helpful for you to hear that even professional writers, even professional writing coaches, even folks who have been doing this for decades, sometimes it's just not going to work, and that is fine. So the way that kind of my last month or so of writing broke down, I knew that I was headed to this kind of major point in my book. Now, sometimes we call this the midpoint. In our memoir method system, we call this the misguided step. But at any rate, this center point of your book, it's pretty important. It's got to be a scene that is pretty pivotal, and it also has to really tie into whatever that message and topic that you're talking about are. For me, the hard part was not that, although that can be pretty challenging when it's your first time. For me, the hard part was how heavy this scene was. And what I had done was I had written chapter 6 in 1 week, I'd written chapter 7 in 1 week, I wrote chapter 8 in 1 week, and then I got to chapter 9. Now, as I went into that coffee shop, I will tell you, I had a fair amount of dread. Just revisiting this incident, I just didn't want to do it, frankly. It was a really painful incident. There was a lot of kind of betrayal involved in it. I just didn't want to do it. Well, all right, that's okay. I had my plan, right? So I pulled up the plan that I had made for my chapter, for that chapter of that day. I pulled it from my outline, of course. And then I looked at how I had planned to start. And you know what? It actually was kind of more set up. Now, I had some scenes and things in there, but it was a little bit of a build into this big pivotal scene. So, all right, well, we can do that. Well, what ended up happening was I wrote about 2,500 words, 2,000. So that's going to be about 7, 8, 9 double-spaced pages, about half-ish of how long my chapters are in this particular book. Now, I'm an overwriter. They probably won't be that long in the end, but I know to expect about like 4,500, 5,000 per chapter right now. Well, once I got done with the 2,000, 2,500, I had gotten to that point in the chapter where this pivotal scene was about to start. And I didn't want to do it. I was tired. I was grumpy about it. I pulled up that HR document I mentioned a little bit ago and I looked at it and I couldn't do it, y'all. I couldn't. So I had two choices. One choice is that I could have made myself write. And I could have done it. I had that HR document, right? I really was just translating it into the voice of the book. I could have done it, but I know that I would have been miserable. And what happens when we leave a writing session miserable is that we think the next writing session is going to be miserable too. Even if we logically know that's not the case, just having that emotional association with your writing session is not good. So that was one choice I could have made. I could have punished myself into doing that chapter. Butt in seat, knock it out, get it done. That's not what I chose. I chose my second choice, which is to pause, really be honest with myself. Is the reason I don't want to do this just that I want to, go run around and do something more fun? That's not always a bad reason. Or is the reason I don't want to do this that really it's heavy and I don't want to do it? Well, I chose that one and I forgave myself before I even got mad. I plan to do that scene the next time and I let it just swim a little bit in my head. I don't want it in the center of my life, but it can kind of swim in my head a little bit so I can get used to the feeling and the idea of revisiting it. Well, I'll tell you what, the week after that, there was a big family function that was coming up. I knew I was going to be really, really tired from it, so I didn't write. I met my friend for coffee. We just had coffee and then I went home. But yesterday, I knocked out the rest of that scene. I finished it up. I think it's pretty good. And I felt pretty good when I was done, actually. I felt pretty proud of myself. I was drained. I was tired. It was really hard to relive it, but it felt good to be done. So I say that because you can choose the kinder option too. And I promise you, it'll serve you better every single time. Can we punish ourselves into creative expression? Yes, we can. I did it for years and years and years and years. And I will tell you, my mental and my physical health were not as good as they could have been. And I will also tell you, that work is not the work that I'm the most proud of in my life. Instead, what we've got to do is reward ourselves and coax ourselves and give ourselves the structure that we need to feel really, really good about this thing we're trying to do. Okay, so as you are thinking about your writing routine, I really want you to remember that all of us change over our lifespans. All of us have different seasons in our lives, and oftentimes those are shorter periods than we think. So, as you are thinking about your writing routine, and particularly if you're someone who has had a writing routine in the past and it doesn't seem to be working, I want you to be really gentle with yourself. All of us have to shift up our writing routines, change up our writing routines, find new ways, experiment. And through all of that, we have to remember that this is our birthright. Creativity, writing, finding this time to be with our thoughts. It's our birthright. It is part of what makes us human. So let's not beat ourselves up about it. That doesn't seem appropriate at all in that context. Instead, I want you to think really carefully about how you can try a new writing routine that's going to serve you and serve your project. And that means it's got to feel good. Okay, I am so excited to hear about how these tips serve you, how you find that writing routine. And if you want to share your writing routine, especially if you've got something that's unusual or interesting or creative, I want to hear about it. So leave us a comment, like, rate, share, review, subscribe. We really appreciate your help at reaching more people who need us. So I can't wait to hear from you. And in the meantime, happy writing. You know that feeling when a book just hits you? Not because the story is wild, but because it's shaped so intentionally that it almost makes you rethink your own story. You finish that last page and think, how did they do that? The structure, the honesty, the clarity. There's something under the surface that you just can't put your finger on. And the reason is, unless someone shows you how memoirs actually work, it's hard to translate that inspiration into your own writing. And that's exactly why we created the Memoir Method Monthly Book Club. If you want to join Emily Thrash every single month to dig into an exemplary memoir and figure out what's happening under the surface, head over to pageandpodium.com/book club. Your first month is free, and we can't wait to welcome you to the group.